Welcome to another episode of the Plant Orlando podcast, brought to you by the Orlando Church Planting Network. We are a collaborative network of churches here in the greater Orlando area that are seeking to train and send leaders and multiply new churches so that we can see greater Orlando saturated with the gospel. We want our city to be the kind of place where every man, woman, and child has repeated opportunities to hear, see, and respond to the gospel. Today on the podcast, we have my good friend Eduardo Rivera, who was part of our very first cohort back in 22-23. Welcome to the podcast, brother.
Yeah, thank you, Gabe.
Excited to have you here today and to talk about all that God's done in your life before OCPN and now through OCPN. But before we
Sure.
jump into all that, you've been in Orlando for a while. Tell us what's one thing that you love about Orlando.
I think Orlando, it's a great city which you can find anything. You can do anything here. You can find any entertainment. You can find any group of people. You can find any type of a church. I mean, you can find anything here in Orlando, and it's great to be part of a city that is growing and it has a lot to offer. I will say a lot to offer.
You have a favorite restaurant? What's your go-to restaurant in Orlando?
So my favorite restaurant used to be Joe's Crab. I think they're closing them right now. So I'm trying to find a substitute for my birthdays. That's where I usually go. So I'm trying to find something similar.
Okay. Like seafood? You love seafood?
Seafood, yeah, like king crab legs. Sit down with a bowl, make a mess. That's what I do for birthdays.
Nice. Awesome. How about a date night spot? Do you and Saritza have a favorite date night?
Yeah, we usually go to Melting Pot.
Okay.
That used to be our spot. Since the kids are growing up, they don't like it. So we've been trying to switch it a little bit. But Melting Pot, I would say, is our favorite.
Nice. Well, tell us about your background. Tell us where'd you grow up? How'd you come to faith in
Yes.
Christ?
So I'm originally from Puerto Rico. I grew up in a Christian household. I'll say half Christian, half not. Um, but I grew up in Puerto Rico. I was there until I was 26. When I was 26, I moved here to Orlando in 2001. So I've been here 25 years or so, and you know, it's been a quite a journey to be here for that long, and the learning process, the cultures, um, it's been different. And I came to faith. Interesting. I mean, I think for me, it's a great. I was 11 years old, and I was in a like four houses down from my house in Puerto Rico in a like a I'll say a community group, what we call a community group. Back then, it was called like I don't know Mission House or something, and there was a gathering of people, and I was 11 years old listening to this story, which I mean I grew up in church, so I know this, but like that night I was there listening, and it was late, and I remember my mom called and hey, she said, "Hey, it's kind of late. We're we're four houses down." So I went home and I told mom, I said, "Hey, I need to go back. I'll be back soon," because they were about to do the call, like to the altar. Back in those days, you come to the front, we pray for you. If you accept, they make this call. So I went back and I just felt like, man, I need to make this step. So I went forward. They prayed for me. They did the whole thing, and then I went home, and 11 years old, it's like, okay, now I gotta go to bed. So I started my journey uh, in the faith, and it's been awesome to see what God has done. From 11 years old all the way to now. So it's been a great journey.
Yeah, tell us how did you feel called to ministry? How did that journey happen into
Yeah,
ministry?
I was a part of the youth group in our church in Puerto Rico. It was a big church, and I was part of the worship. And one of the things we used to do is to go to places to worship and just to have like I will call it like a night of worship, but in different places. And this particular day, we were called to go to what was called Hogar Crea in Puerto Rico, which is like teen challenge here, drug addicts and stuff like that. So we had that. We we went that, we were in the parking lot, we're getting everything ready, and someone says, "Hey, somebody needs to preach. We're worshiping, but we don't have nobody." And they said, "Eduardo, you're on." So I
Wow.
remember thinking, man, what do I share with these guys? This is like drug addicts and your stage of life. And I believe that God was like, share this. So I share the Hagar story, the servant or slave, whatever you want to call it, Hagar from Abraham's story in Genesis 16 and then 21. She was like out of the house twice, and I share that with them and what it's like to be in a position of suffering when you probably didn't, do anything to be in that position. And I remember sharing that with the team, and I shared that with the guys there at the facility, and I was like, man, everybody was like, that was a message, man. Like that was great, and I felt like God saying, "I've given you something. This is what I want you to do." From there on, I knew that God was calling me to ministry, and I started to look what would that look like for me to step. So I did a couple of steps in Puerto Rico back in before coming here. I started the process of going to seminar in Puerto Rico, and then 2001 I came back here. So it took me a little bit to go back to seminary. 03, 04, and I started preparing.
Awesome. Tell us about your family. Tell us, you married, kids.
Yes. So I'm married to Saritza, also from Puerto Rico, but she grew up here. I have two kids. Eduardo is 13. Marcos is going to be 10 in May. And I'm so grateful for this family that God has put together. Like what a journey to be part of, the adoption process, to learn what it means to adopt some kids and, to have that family. And it's been awesome journey. Wouldn't change it for anything. They're not adopted, they're mine. I don't think they're adopted, I think they're mine. So it's been a great story too of family.
Yeah. Yeah. And you and I have that in common that we have
Yes.
two adoptive sons around the similar ages, and we're both, now in that middle school stage, which is fun.
Yes. That's awesome. That
Yeah.
is awesome.
So tell me, you've been in Orlando for, you said, 25 years.
Uh-huh.
You've been a part of several different churches during those 25 years. How did you find yourself jumping into OCPN, this brand new thing that was starting? We had an idea of a vision for what we wanted to do, but you guys were really the first
Hmm.
guinea pig group. And how'd you get connected to us?
So I was at that time. Um, I just had resigned from a position in a local church, and I was working at a substitute position in schools. Uh, Actually praying and asking God, what's the next thing for me. Um, Somebody told me about OCPN, and I was like, man, that's a great opportunity. I went to the interest meeting that you guys offered. I heard what you guys were trying to do, and I really like. I was very excited to see what would that look like in my journey, in what God has put on my heart. So I, started the process, and I was trying to see where does what I have in my head fit in OCPN. So I ended up going to the meetings, listening, and I said, man, I got to jump into this opportunity. So it was great.
Awesome. And how did the cohort, being a part of that for 9 months, how did that help you on your ministry journey? What were the things
Yeah,
that impacted you?
yeah, I think, being part of several churches and working or serving as a lay person, doing a lot of stuff, you don't know or you don't understand really what's behind the scenes, what's really happening. And even though some of my volunteering positions were like high capacity, it wasn't as a staff. So the cohort, really helped to understand what's behind. What is the work, the legwork that you have to do, like developing a core group, how to fundraise, how to build solid relationships. What does it mean to, care for people, and also how to care as a pastor, as somebody leading, as also being a husband, a brother, a son, and somebody that is called to care for the flock, but then also how do you serve and keeping a balance. So the cohort, I think it was great in giving me all this comprehension and understanding what's behind the scenes.
Yeah. So coming into the cohort, you were planning to plant a church plant called El Pueblo,
El pueblo.
and yeah, El Pueblo, and that was the idea, and we were excited to see you plant a Spanish speaking church called El
Yeah,
Pueblo in the West Orange area. Through by the end of the cohort, you decided instead to jump in with Mosaic and start our Spanish ministry called Mosaic Espanol. So tell us about that decision, and then also tell us about the vision for Mosaic Espanol.
sure. Well, I always wanted it to, I felt like God is calling me to serve the Hispanic community, to provide a space where people can call home, a place to worship. But But I wanted to do it in a way that people understand culture. What's the difference? How is it that we can do a Hispanic church within a culture? Even if you plan a Hispanic church, you need to understand what's around you, how the system behaves, and all this stuff. So even when I started doing El Pueblo, I had a podcast called El Pueblo also, and I was doing that. And when the opportunity comes to say, well, do I plant a church or do I jump into this opportunity? I think it was a similar opportunity in planting like a church or starting this ministry within Mosaic structure. And I think it was a similar position or vision to uh, to reach people, to have a ministry where people can come to know God and to find community as we become more like Jesus, right? So that's what we want to do as a church. And I said, well, I can do that as a planting, pastor of a church, or I can do it in the ministry. And I just jumped into the challenge and started that journey also.
So as you were going through the cohort and you were getting to know people at Mosaic, you came to know a number of Hispanics at Mosaic,
Yes.
and then also getting to know, around Winter Garden, Ocoee, the Hispanics that are in this area. Tell us about the need that you've seen for this kind of ministry.
Yeah, I think Orlando being what it is and everybody's coming here because of the opportunities that are present here in Orlando. I think a lot of community, a lot of Hispanics will come here and they will try to find their way. So what you find here in Orlando or Winter Garden is a mix of Central America Hispanics, people from Argentina, Chile. So I'll say, Dominican Republic. We have Hispanics from everywhere. So I coming into ministry, there has to be an understanding of what is the background cultures of these people and what they understand about church, how they have experienced church. And so we have a mix of all these experiences, and it's a challenge to find a common ground and say, hey, let's worship God, and this is how we do it. So it's a little bit of a challenge to understand that, but it's not impossible to find that.
Yeah. Yeah, people talk about multi-ethnic ministry or multicultural ministry, and I often say if you're planting a Spanish-speaking church in the US, or you're starting a Spanish-speaking ministry in partnership with an English-speaking church or an Anglo church, you you are by nature going to be doing multicultural, multi-ethnic
Sure.
ministry, because
Yes.
you're not just going to reach just Puerto Ricans or just
Hmm.
Guatemalans or just Venezuelans. If you're doing Spanish speaking ministry in the US, you're going to reach people from lots, especially in Orlando, from every country in Latin America. There's
Hmm.
representation here. And of course there are some groups that are larger, like the Venezuelans and Colombians,
Yeah.
in recent years, but it's always going to be diverse. It's always going to be multicultural, multi-ethnic.
Yeah, and I think also this process of education, like all our
Mm-hmm.
experiences about churches in our countries,
Mm-hmm.
will take somebody here, and you're gonna start going to church from church to church, trying to find that Hispanic community that you know is what you like. But then it feels sometimes, and I've heard talk to people like I don't find a church that I like, and it's because you're driven by your experience in your
Hmm.
country, which is not bad, but I think we need to have an understanding of, there's a different cultural difference in how we do ministry here. Even though we're Hispanics, we need to understand that there's a level of compromise, if you will, if you call it that, on how we do ministry here. So yeah, we find a lot of people that are looking for that community. And we need to, our challenge is to find that. How do we provide that in a healthy way, not just to give them what they want, but actually serving them well? I will say that's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. That can be a challenge. So tell me, how are you seeing God at work so far? What are maybe some things that you're celebrating right now
Yes,
in what you're seeing God do in Mosaic Espanol?
sure. Well, one of the things that, and I've seen God doing this, and I remember during the cohort in our time with one-on-one with, facilitators, I was amazed in how much I didn't know. Like you come with this mentality. I've done church for this many years. I've been part of this. And what I've seen God doing is not what He's doing in the community, which He is, but how much I have changed, how much I have learned, and God showing me, you thought this, and this is how it is, or how much I have to grow in my probably having, you know, patience or frustrations or this many things are a challenge, and I find God changing me, which I think it's ultimately what He wants from us is to change us and to make us more or better disciples of Him. So I've seen God working in me. Obviously, He done a lot in our community. We have a strong core group in our church. We have people that come every Sunday, the same people committed, serving. So God has done great things in this journey of Mosaic Espanol. So to celebrate, we celebrate what we have, well, not we, but God has done through the journey of Mosaic Espanol, which we have a strong women's group that meets every month. And we have, I'll say, probably 60% of our people goes to this women's group. And also we have people that maybe don't attend on Sundays, but they're coming to the women's group. So that is something that we celebrate. We celebrate the men's group. We meet monthly also, and it's been great to sit down with men and talk what to them about what God wants from men in the faith and how we lead people, how we lead our families. So that's been awesome, and also the community groups. The community group has been a strong group from the beginning. That was one of the first things we did. So we are celebrating, what God has done in our midst. Not necessarily, well, what we're doing on Sundays is great, but actually these small community groups where people build relationships, where people get to know each other, where people share their struggles. So I think that's what we celebrate, and we've been celebrating that for almost 2-3 years now.
What are some of the things that over these past couple of years that you and Mosaic Espanol have done to try to serve and connect with the Hispanic community in our area?
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think it's one of the biggest lessons for me is that as pastors, we're not saviors. We have a desire to plant a church. We have a desire to develop a ministry, and we'll do almost anything, right? To take this vision of what God has called us to do. We'll do anything, but then it's like we cannot do everything. So one of the struggles that I would say every planter has is to have more people, to see an increase of numbers of people coming in, and we'll try to, let me see how can I help this person or this family, and then we get into situations where we cannot do more, and we struggle with that. And so I have learned that we're not saviors. We cannot do everything that needs to be done. We really want to take care of our people, and we want to serve them well. But there are moments that, maybe God is doing something in this family, in this person, in this individual, and we need to also provide space for God to do what He's doing. right? And not try
Mhm.
to fix it or try to do something. So that for me, it's been a big lesson, I'll say, in the last year and a half. Um, like you need to let God be God, let Him do what He's going to do, and then, I'll step back and keep doing what I need to do and not necessarily provide all the solutions, all the answers. So I think that's a big lesson for me.
Yeah, in Florida, so this kind of blows my mind that one in four people in Florida are Hispanic, and when you come to Greater Orlando, it's more like 1 in 3. So like
Yes.
35% of Greater Orlando is Hispanic, and that's huge. But one in
Hmm.
three people are Hispanic, and when we look at kind of the landscape of churches in Orlando, there's Spanish speaking churches, and there's also churches that are doing Spanish ministry,
Hmm.
as part of their either as a Spanish speaking campus or Spanish speaking congregation that they partner with, or a Spanish speaking ministry like Mosaic Espanol. Man, there's such an opportunity. What have been some of the greatest challenges that you've experienced in trying to reach what Hispanics in this area when 1 in 3 people in Orlando are Hispanics?
Yes. I think it's part of what I was mentioning before in the sense of what is it they're looking for? What is it that people are looking for? And also, there's some expectations of people like, I used to go to this church, and then
Oh,
here it's not like this. Or maybe it's
right.
a lack of resources. Maybe it's, the distance. Here roads can get a little bit busy from time to time in different seasons. Also, I think the challenge for the Hispanic community is the situation that we encounter when we move to a different country or a different city, which is what kind of jobs do we get? What kind of hours do we get? What kind of opportunity we
Yeah.
have to reach out to people? What kind of community are people living in because they cannot afford this community, so I have to go move to this place. So there's a lot of challenges that we encounter as church planters or developing a ministry that we need to understand the reality of the community so we can actually create strategies that are effective with those realities. So
Mhm.
I think the challenge is how do we take this mentality of I cannot do church, because of my circumstances. And we need to spend a lot of time changing the mentality and explaining culture. This is how the system works. And I'm a big fan of talking about, the culture and changing the mentality or understanding what we are living in, like what kind of system, culture, or structure, if you will, we're living in. So I would say that's the challenge, the reality of the community.
Yeah. So as you've been, leading Mosaic Espanol these last almost 3 years, what are you seeing when it comes to the Hispanic community, particularly in our area in West Orange County? What are people's dreams? What are people's fears? And how does the gospel give an answer to those?
Yeah, I think that in the last, I'll say, year, one of the biggest fears, with this immigration situation that's going on, uncertainty, people are scared, people are not coming out. Also, one of the challenges is how do we how do we keep people in this journey of faith when everything looks like that it's not working, right?
Mm.
You come with a dream to find a better life, a better job, a better future, maybe for your kids or your family. And, you come with this kind of dream, and then all of a sudden you find out that it's not that easy. Then
Mhm.
what's our role as a church? And, what is it that we need to do to help people understand that God has a plan for you? And obviously everybody think about having more. That's the culture, right? That's we come to the West and this is the culture. We need to have more. And the challenge is to have people understand that the bigger house, the bigger car, the biggest opportunity or job, it's a great thing. That's a great thing to pursue. You need a relationship with God. That's the first thing you need. That's the first thing you need. If you take care of that, if you look to have a relationship with God, if you really look to live a life that you honor God and you're looking for Him, all the things, right? Look first for the things above, the glory of God. Those are the things that we look for, and then everything else will come. So I think that's one of the challenge. And how do you make people understand that in their reality of, I have a dream when I come here to Orlando? And we have a
Yeah.
lot of that in our community.
Yeah. Tell me, as you think about Mosaic Espanol, where the ministry's at and where you want to see it go.
Sure.
What are your top biggest, top two or three biggest needs right now as a ministry?
Yeah, I think we're in a great spot and great opportunity to serve the Hispanic community. One of the biggest things that we need is how do the structure of the ministry, adding pieces to the ministry that will allow for more people to come and enjoy the gathering. What kind of liturgy you do during the gathering so people enjoy it. Sometimes people come with certain expectations. So one of the biggest, I'll say, needs right now is finding those pieces. We can say maybe a worship leader to help us in the structure of the gathering, having that time of people worshiping and be guided through that period. Also, now we are having a lot of people coming to visiting, to visit the gathering, to be with us, exploring what the gathering looks like, and we need to follow up. We need to call back. We need to send an email. We need to take care of people, and so we need maybe a worship leader. We need a coordinator, somebody that help us with the load when people start coming in. So I would say that will be the most pressing thing to coordinate schedules, planning 6 months ahead, 7 months ahead. That kind of stuff. This is the structure that helps a ministry move forward.
Yeah. If someone is listening and they're a Spanish speaker, or they know, or they, have some friends or coworkers or neighbors that are Spanish speakers, and they don't have a good church that they're a part of. They're not connected to a community. How can they get involved with you guys? How can they jump into participate in Mosaic Espanol?
Sure. First of all, I'll say come and visit us. Come and take a look uh, at what we're doing. Come and know not just Mosaic Espanol, but come and know Mosaic. What is the church doing? Because Mosaic Espanol is not a separate church. We're not a separate ministry outside of what Mosaic is doing. So what we're doing is what Mosaic is doing. So I'll say, come check us out, take a look at the facilities, enjoy some donuts, coffee. You can come and visit Mosaic Espanol. You can come and visit our, gatherings on Mondays. Just get to know the church, get involved, and see what God is doing. I'll say, if you don't understand English. We have a translation ministry. Come and enjoy the gathering. And also come and visit Mosaic Espanol at 502 every Sunday. Come and check us out, know people, understand what the ministry is about, and we'll love to see you and just to share what God is doing at Mosaic.
Yeah. So for those that speak Spanish, Mosaic's 11:17 service, we translate the English gathering so they can listen and there's simultaneous translation, or they can come to the 502 and the gathering is in Spanish at 5:02 p.m. Right?
Yeah, we're there every Sunday. Every Sunday at 502. At the beginning, people were saying, are you still gathering at 5? And I keep telling people every Sunday, it doesn't matter. We're going to be here at 5. So that's, and maybe we're past that conversation, but that's the other thing. Consistency, I think,
Mhm.
lacks in Hispanic ministry historically. When you visit churches, sometimes, they're not there anymore. So I think that's also the consistency that we have. I think to me, is great. So come check us out.
Yeah, that's awesome. Anything else that you'd like to share as we wrap up this podcast?
Yeah, I think if you're watching this and you're not, what's planting, what having ministry within the churches, the first thing I'll say is just pray that God will continue to bless our ministry, will continue to give us whatever is it that we need to do ministry. And also for the community, for the church, the people that come with, real situations and struggles, and just pray for Mosaic Espanol and just pray for Mosaic. Again, come and join us, see what we're doing. We have mission trips, we do events at Mosaic Espanol, we join all the ministries and events that Mosaic as a church is doing. So it's a great place to be. So I will encourage you to pray and then to come and visit us and see what God's doing.
Awesome. Thanks, Eduardo. Thanks for your time. Thanks for sharing. And it's great to be able to share with our network, an update on how God's working in your life since you were part of the first cohort.
Yeah, thank you, Gabe, for having me, man. It's been great to know you and to be part of OCPN. And I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing, man. You're doing great.
Thank you, brother.